KC1JPD, good evening, Jeffrey, and how many working HTs do you have? Good evening, Roger, Dick, Vicky, and everyone on the net. You can put me down for 10. I have 3 dual band ham radios, and then of the other 7, they're all GMRS, CB, FRS. So I wasn't sure if you just wanted the ham radios. That would be 3 or 10 overall. But I hope everyone has a wonderful night. It's a nice, cold, snowy night here in Vermont, and I'm going to send it back to net, KC1JPD. 10 it is, Jeffrey. Have a warm, or hope you have a warm evening there in Milton, Vermont. Let's move on to Tom, Northborough, Massachusetts, KC1VHD. Good evening, Tom.
I've got 6. I've got everything from a UV5R up to a Kenwood THD75A. And so 2 of them are tri-band, the rest are dual band. Massachusetts is nice and chilly.
Very nice,
getting
Tom.
a lot of snow,
like you're set there, and it's a wonder I didn't come home with more of them after the hamcation.
They're doing pretty well,
I
nice
just
and
took
warm.
so much cash, and I knew I wanted to get a laptop so I could do some QRZ and a few of those things to keep me going for years. All right, let's move on to Webb, Collierville, Tennessee, N1WEB. Good evening, Webb.
Two are ham band, 2 are GRMS, and if it counts, I've got 2 tin cans and some string too, but I don't think that'll cut it. Hey Roger, we'll see you on Thursday morning for the 20 meter. This is Webb, N1 WEB, back to net.
QSL Webb, thanks for joining us this evening. We got you down for 4, and yes, we'll see you there, all everything willing. Let's move on to the 2s. This is KO4QMM, Roger, in Central Florida. We're going to move on to the 2s. If you have your call sign, come twice and slow.
KD2 venue, KD2 venue. N2BH, N2BH.
N2VNM, David and crew.
I copy you, copy you. No copy me. W2KJV, W2KJV. JB. No JJB.
All right, from the bottom up, we got Tony, Homasa, Florida, W2KJV, Robert, Kellyville Ridge, New South Wales, VK2DY, and we got KD2VNU, Derby Dan, Derby, New York, N2BH via text line, Bill, Palmyra, New York, W2RBC via text line, Randy, West Seneca, New York, W2AJR via text line, Andy, Cheektowaga, New York, KD2JPP, Bob, Gallatin, Tennessee. If I didn't call your name there, come with your call sign.
This is November 2, Victor, November, Mike. David and Peru.
Kilo 207 Yankee Bravo Papa, Annette, in Twin Falls, Idaho. All right. That last one, was that would you come back again?
Kilo.
Oh. All right, we're going to move on. We got it via text line W2EM Chuck, and we got data N2VNM Peru, New York. Let's move up to the top of the line here. KD2JPP Bob, Gallatin, Tennessee. Good evening, Bob. And how many working H do you have this evening?
Hey, good evening, Roger. Hello to everybody else on the net. The amount of HTs working that I can actually put my eyes on, we got 15. I hope everybody stays safe, has a great week, and back to net control. KD2JPP.
Thank you, Bob, for joining us this evening, and 15 ought to do it. Let's move on to Andy, Cheektowaga, New York, via text line. W2AJR. How about it, Andy?
Good evening, everybody in that. Boy, I'm not sure I want to say now. After Bob and Jeff with their 15, I've got HT Envy, I think. I've got three working. Back to you. 7-3 all.
Awesome, Andy. Thanks for joining us this evening, and we got you down for 3. Let's move on to my buddy Randy, West Seneca, New York, W2RBC via text line. Good evening, Randy.
Good evening, Roger, Vicky, and everyone on the TechNet. I only have 4 working HTs. I prefer using a mobile or base unit, so I seldom use the HTs. Back to net control, 73 to all, W2RBC.
Thanks for joining us, Randy. I'll be looking forward to 20-meter net with you Thursday at 10 a.m. Let's move on to Bill, Palmyra, New York, via text line N2BH. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Roger and everybody. I've got, I'll say 8, and they're a mix. I got a couple GMRS, got a 220, one for D-Star, one for Wires X, and so on, and 2BH.
Thank you, Bill, for joining us, and 8 ought to be enough. I think there was a show like that, 8's enough, so that works. And Bill is one of our facilitators for East Coast Reflector, along with this next guy, Derby Dan from Derby, New York, KD2VNU. Good evening, Dan.
Thank you, Roger. Good evening to everybody. KD2VNU. I have 6. A combination of things, so we'll return to that. Thanks for having me, KD2VNU.
Thanks for joining us, Dan. I would expect more coming from you, being an old Motorola guy. Thanks for joining us again. Let's move on to VK2DY, Robert, Kellyville Ridge, New South Wales. Good evening, Robert. How many working HTs do you have?
Good evening to you. Good afternoon to you. This is Robert from K2DY, where it is, 26, that's about 79, 80 Fahrenheit. And that's probably all we'll get today. It's been cooled off. We've got a touch of autumn here in Sydney. Well, let's see. I have one DMR that's working, one 70 centimeter, 2 meter that's working, and we have a couple of UHF-CBs. Here in Australia, we have UHF-CB that operates at 476, 477 megahertz, and it is the standard of communication if you're out in the bush. If you're anywhere out of town and you need to communicate, it is the UHF CD, so I have a couple of those. So let's say 4 total. VK2DY.
Thank you, Robert, for joining us this evening, and you have a great signal coming in from Australia. Let's move on to Tony, Homosassa, Florida, W2KJV. Good evening, Tony, and how many working HTs might you have?
Good evening, Roger, and Vicky, Dick, and everyone on the TechNet tonight. Tony here, W2KJV. We're at 64.2 degrees in Homosassa. Well, I got 19. I got 3 Kenwood THF6s. I got an ICOM W2A, Yaesu TF470, and the rest are TID or Belfang, so I got a bunch. And the KV2 QB, not too happy about it. But anyways, back to you, Roger. Hope everyone has a great night. W2KJV.
That's pretty good there, Tony. Thanks for joining us this evening. Hope you have a wonderful evening. Let's move on to David, Peru, New York, N2VNM. Good evening, David.
Good evening to everybody on the net, and you, Roger, too. I don't know what the question was, but it sounded like how many HTs you have. I have a few. Don't use very many just because it's, I've got a few nice 2-meter 440s and stuff like that, but I like the Motorola's. So it's about 6 degrees here, so it's kind of chilly. It's supposed to get really cold the next couple days, so everybody stay warm, and we'll send it back to net control.
All right, David. Hope you have a great evening and us. And we're going to move on to Chuck, Lancaster, New York, via text line. Evening, Chuck. How many working HTs do you have?
Evening, Roger and Vicky and the rest of the crew. You can put me down for 7. I have 2 of the required Bofangs, but the one I use the most is my Yaesu FT3D. So put me down for 7. But if you want to add those FRS, GRMS, the cheap radios that you have around camp, you can add probably another 10 to a dozen. I got a bunch of those down at my hunting camp. But anyway, put me down for 7. 73s, everyone. W2EM.
Thanks, Chuck, for joining us this evening, and you have a great signal. Good audio, sound good. All right, on that note, this is KO4QMM Roger in Central Florida with TechNet. And now we're going to move on to the 3. The 3 in your call sign, come twice and slow.
WB3GGM. Whiskey Baker 3, Golf, Tango, Mike.
Echo 3, India, back uniform, 33I, Junior.
We got the VE3IQU, Reg, Brampton, Ontario, Canada. And we have WB3GTM, Mike, Westford, Vermont. Anybody else with a 3?
Victor Echo 3, Radio Norway Golf.
Kilo Charlie 3, Foxtrot Golf Delta. Kilo Charlie 3, Foxtrot Golf Delta.
CJM, Whiskey 2, Charlie Juliet Mike.
RNG, James, Windsor, Ontario, Canada. And it looks like Charles, Selden, New York just popped up. W2CGM. Anybody else with it? Oh, anybody else with a 3?
Kilo Charlie 3, Foxtrot Golf Delta. Called in before, I didn't hear you respond.
Yes, sir. I was dragging it on a little bit long there, but we got you, Ray. I'm going to go ahead and move to the top now. Mike, Westford, Vermont, WB3GTM. Good evening, Mike. And how many working HTs do you have? Over.
Roger, and everyone on the net. This is Mike WB3GTM. You know, I was just thinking, I don't think I heard how many HTs Dick had. Did he say how many he had? I didn't hear that. But anyhow, I think I got to put in a right into the complaint department. I need more time to count up my HTs. I got a whole lot of them. Trying to count them up. I got at least 20 that I regularly keep charged. At least 20, and there could be a half a dozen other ones that are probably getting dusty at places. So I guess I'll leave it at that for now. But anyhow, hey, thanks for running the net, and thanks for checking me in. Back to net control. This is WB3GTM.
Thank you, Mike, for joining us this evening. And yeah, it sounds like you've been collecting them for a while there. And I always enjoy getting on here and blowing the dust off the mic. It's what this hobby's all about. Enjoy. Thank you. Let's move on to Reg, Brampton, Ontario, Canada. VE3IQU. Good evening, Reg.
And good evening to you and everybody out there in the net tonight from Brampton. And we had a cool day here today, around about the -10 level on the Celsius scale. And we've had a lot of snow the last week or so, and more to come, they say. Anyhow, such is life in winter in Canada, I guess. And wife and I are okay, more or less, and more, probably less than more, but so it is. And as for the radio question, well, I got one. Actually, I've got two, but they're both FT60s, and that's really all I need. I just shake my head when I hear some of you guys at 15, 20 handheld radios. What on earth would you do with them all? Anyhow, each to his own. So I'll toss it back to you there, and hope everybody has a great week, and looking forward to the rest of the net. So back to you, the 3IQU.
Thank you, Reg. We appreciate you joining us this evening, and yeah, I hope you stay warm up there. You sure, all you people up north sure make us feel glad we're where we are at here in Florida. Today I was out on my electric bicycle with shorts and a t-shirt, about 74 degrees and sunny, so I'm sure we'll get ours when summertime comes. Let's move on to James, Windsor, Ontario, Canada. VE3RNG. How many working HTs do you have, James? NG, are you there, sir? Well, maybe something happened there. Who knows? Let's move on to Ray in Elizabethtown, PA. I know he's been waiting patiently. KC3FGD, good evening, Ray.
Hey, good evening, Roger, everyone on the net. I'm just sitting here playing around, selling some stuff on it. Hey, I only have one, and I use it in my vehicle. I have it tied into a mag mount, and I keep it there all the time. All I need. Everyone have a great evening. Back to Net Control.
There we go. That's a little better there. Thanks for joining us, Ray. And you must be selling some coasters, I'm guessing, on eBay. I'm from the wood shop. I hear you in the morning. All right, I guess that's the end of the threes, and we're going to move. Well, we do have a W2CGM there. Charles, Sells, New York. Must have been a late show. W2CGM, you there, Charles?
Everybody in the net, yes, I am. I have 4 HTs. Thanks for picking. Sorry I was late, but I was just driving back. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Good deal there. I just caught you out of my rear view mirror and said I better call them. Appreciate it. Have a great evening. Be safe. Let's move on to the 4s now. This is in Central Florida. And yes, we're going to move on to the 4s now. Via text line, I got Les, Claremont, Florida, KK4SED. Chris, Parrish, Florida, KQ4GLY. Scott, Memphis, Tennessee, KY4B. Brian, Monticello, Kentucky, KK4JPW. Joe, Sorrento, Florida, KO4FRR. Anybody else that wants to get in on the list, whether your call sign is a 4 in it, come with your call sign.
Whiskey 4, Papa Papa X-ray, W4, PPX. Whiskey 4, November, Echo Whiskey. The name is Mike.
And for PWG, Bernie in Fort Lauderdale. Kilo Quebec 4, Zulu Golf Foxtrot, KQ4, ZGF.
November 4, Romeo Hotel Echo. November 4, Romeo Hotel Echo. Kilo Quebec 4, Foxtrot Hotel Echo. Kilo Quebec 4, Foxtrot Hotel Echo.
This is 9Y4EX. Yankee 4 Delta X-ray. Good.
All right, you gotta love the 4s. Got a nice list there. NY4DX Bertrand from Trinidad, Tobago. Roger, N4RHE, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Pat, Harvest, Alabama. KQ4FHE. Byron, Rockhold, Kentucky. KQ4ZGF. Bernie, Davie, Florida. N4BWG. Mike, Pembroke Pines, Florida. WW4NEW. Don, Hollywood, Florida. W4PPX. That's it. Let's move to the top of the line here. KK4SED, text line. Les, Claremont, Florida. How many working HTs do you have left?
Roger and everybody on the net. Yeah, I'm looking here at the list. Some got quite a few. I have 7, but you're right. How many can you use at one time? So I got to rethink of what I'm doing here in the shack. So hey, good net this evening. Thanks for allowing me to check in. KK4SED back to net.
QSLS, don't ever worry about having too many. If anything ever happens, you can always pass them out and everybody can talk to each other. So at least you have that. Let's move on to Chris, Parrish, Florida, KQ4GLY. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, Roger, and everyone on the net. I have 5 working HTs. Back to you.
QSL, Chris, thanks for joining us this evening, and we'll be looking for you down the line. Let's move on to K4NB, Scott, Memphis, Tennessee, home of Elvis and barbecue. How many working HTs do you have, Scott?
Roger and everybody on the TechNet. I've got about 3 that have seen some use in the last few years here, and we're getting some snow tonight and some cold weather, and then it'll warm up on Monday, I think. But sorry about the multiple text check-ins. I just never got a confirmation like I usually do, so I'm glad you got me on the list. And everybody have a safe evening, get some rest, and we'll talk to everybody on the brew in the morning. KY4NB, back to net. Thanks for calling it, Roger. We appreciate it.
QSL, Scott, thanks for joining us as always. You are definitely a regular, and we appreciate it. Move on to Brian, Monticello, Kentucky via text line KK4JPW. How about it, Brian? How many working HDs do you have?
Good evening, everybody on the net. Technically 3. I've been fighting with a DMR radio for a while now. Hopefully I'm about to get all the kinks worked out. Yeah, it's a combination of using a mutable Linux system at home and a Windows-only driver. But, yes, 3 though.
All right, Brian, we got you down for 3. And yeah, I got 3 too, and it matters what I'm doing for which one I'm going to use. I definitely don't take the good ones out kayaking anymore or bicycling, so I keep them close to home. All right, this is KO4QMM. Let's move on to my buddy Joe in Sorrento, Florida, one of the ECR administrators here. Good evening, Joe. And how many working HDs do you have? Over.
Good evening, Roger and Vicky and the crew. This is Joe, KF4FR. I would have to put down about 6. This is KF4FR. It's bedtime. Have a good night.
You have a good night too, Joe. Hope you have a great day at work tomorrow, and thanks for all your help at Hamcation and getting my computers and nodes and stuff all in sync. Appreciate it. Let's move on to Don, Wood, Florida, W4PPX. Good evening, Don.
Good evening, Roger, Vicky, everybody on the TechNet tonight. Yeah, put me down for, well, I've got 6, but put me down for 4 because those are the ones I mainly use. So, 7-3, hope everybody has a good night. W4PPX, back to you.
You have a great night there, dude, too, Don, and we appreciate you being around. Let's move on to Mike, Pembroke Pines, Florida, WW4NEW. Good evening, Don. Mike.
Well, it's Mike, not Don. You got it right the first time. Anyway, I don't have any handy talkies at all. Don't know that I really want one.
Hey, Mike, that was straight and forward there. Yeah, sometimes I look at the call sign and I get the wrong name. It's just how fast my eyes are moving. Sorry about that, but we got you in there. Thanks for joining us this evening. Let's move on to Bernie, Davie, Florida. N4BWG. Good evening, Bernie, and how many working HTs do you have?
Good evening. Yeah, it's almost embarrassing to say, but I have 24 and one on the way, but because I'm kind of into business, I have access to most of them are Motorola's and a few other stragglers there. But yeah, I just gave 3 away, actually, of the cheaper brands. But like I said, it's kind of embarrassing when people find out. But it's fun. I love it. I wouldn't give them up for the world.
It doesn't sound like you're going to give them up anytime soon there, and that's up there towards the top of the list there, Bernie. So appreciate you joining us this evening, and a lot of fun learning how many things we have on some of these questions they ask. Makes you go out and count and look around. Let's move on to Byron, Rockhold, Kentucky, KQ4ZGF. Good evening, Byron.
Good evening, y'all. This is Bryn of KQ4ZGF. It's Bryn, B-R-Y-N, in Rockhold, Kentucky. I've got 3 working handhelds, 2 Balpangs, and the QRZ Explorer. I'm sure there's a lot more in my future. Anyway, that's it for me. Back to Nick Control, KQ4ZGF.
QSL, Bryn, that was my bad. I think he had it wrote down just fine, and I didn't know. I thought maybe she was abbreviating it or something. No problem. I'll remember it for now on. Thanks for joining us this evening. Let's move on to Pat, Harvest, Alabama, KQ4FHE. Good evening, Pat.
Good evening, Roger, and everybody else on the net. I have one handy talkie. It's a QRZ1 manufactured in China. Send me praise to everybody. Have a good evening. Back to you, Roger.
Thank you, Pat. You have a fantastic evening and a great day tomorrow. Let's move on to my buddy Roger, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, N4RHE. Good evening, Roger.
Good evening, Roger. From the other Florida Roger. November 4, Romeo Teleco, you sound good. 6 total handheld transceivers. 1 Anytone 868, 2 Kenwood THF6As, tri-band and SSB wide receive that go from 0.1 megahertz to 1300 megahertz. Great radios. And 3 stars. They're great radios. 6 total. November 4, Roger Ham Enthusiast. Return to net.
We got you down, my friend, for 6, and we missed you at Hamcation. I was looking forward to meeting you there. So hopefully next year you can get up there and meet us. All right, let's move on to Bertrand. This is KO4QMM, Roger in Central Florida. Let's move on to Bertrand, Trinidad and Tobago, 9Y4DX. Good evening, Bertrand.
Well, pleasant evening to you, Net Cool. KO4QMM, Roger. This is 9Y4DX, Bertrand, and my location, Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. Well, pleasant evening to you and all of the stations this evening on the East Coast
most Reflector TechNet. Hope everyone is doing well and keeping warm. For Trinidad and Tobago at this time, it's around 78 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going up to around 74 later on this evening. And we had a fairly good today, but the forecast for tomorrow and Saturday would be Sahara dust. Not very much, but as the week progresses, we understand here that it will get more and more dusty. Well, that's it for me. Thanks for taking my call. Ask the question. I have one, and will you believe it is not working at the moment? I am in the process of getting a new one. It's from me, no food. Internet control. 304 QMM. This is 9Y4 DX.
Thank you, Bert. Regular and there with your answer. Appreciate it. I have such a trouble with all those T's. It's Trin City, Trinidad, and Tobago. Whew. It's a lot of T's going on there when you're trying to move fast. So appreciate it, Bertrand. That's it for me, man. I had a lot of fun tonight. Got to talk to a lot of people. Now it's time to move on and let Mr. W2BLT, my buddy Scott in Buffalo, New York, take over from here. He'll take you out the back door, as they say. That's it for me. Over to you, KO4QMM clear.
Thanks, Roger. Fine job, and appreciate you joining us there tonight. Yeah, this is Scott, W2BLT in Buffalo, and I'll be taking the rest of the check-ins. Let's start with the text line. We have K5YNU, Florin, Conroe, Texas. Who else do we have with a 5 in your call sign? Please come now.
Take a light 4.
This is Kilo Julia 5 Julia Mike India, Alfredo in Carolina, Texas.
Alrighty, recognizing KY5 or KJ5JMI. Is there anyone else with a 5 in your call sign? Please come now.
G5 STF, Kilo Golf 5 STF, Valley Tango.
Yeah, that KG5 station. Could you give me the suffix on that again, please, phonetically?
Kilo Golf 5, Sierra Tango.
Alrighty, we got you there, Richie. Let's go to the top of this list. Question of the evening is, how many working HTs do you have? Good evening, Florin.
Four working HTs.
Alrighty. Thanks, Florin, and you have yourself a great evening. Appreciate you joining us. Saw you in the Zoom room there before. Let's go to KJ5 at JMI, Alfredo in Pearland, Texas. Good evening.
Alfredo here in Pearland, Texas. Kilo Julia 5 Julia Mike India. I only have one HT, one working and one in use, but I have plenty of other toys to play with here. I'll be clear on your final 5 JMI.
All right, thanks. And if you make your email public on QRZ, we'll get you out a welcome letter. And don't be a stranger. We're here every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. Bring your any questions, and appreciate you joining us tonight. We have KG5 STF Richie in Cypress, Texas. Good evening.
Good evening to everybody on the net. This is KG5 STF. I have 24 HTs all working.
Wow, I guess you're set for a while. Appreciate you joining us, Richie, and have a great evening. And last on this list via the text line, we have KI5 PMI, Bill in Hobson, Mexico. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening, Scott, everybody on the bridge. Put me down for 0. I have not started down that rabbit hole yet. And according to some of these totals, it seems like it's definitely a rabbit hole. So hope everybody has a good night, and talk with you on the brew in the morning. KI5 PMI, back to net.
Alrighty, Bill, you have a good evening, and come join Dick and Vicky and Al in the morning on the morning brew. It's 7 to 9 Eastern time. Alrighty, it's time to go to the sixes, and via the text line, we have a few here. We have K6AAN, Mike in Valley Springs, California. KC6UFM, Charles in Guatai, California, and KA8BYU, Roy in Blaisdell, New York. Who else do we have with a 6 in your call? Well, please come now with your call sign twice.
Kilo November 6 Golf Sierra Golf. Kilo November 6 Golf Sierra Golf. You care to take a late 4 call?
Alrighty, let me recognize who we have here. We have KN6GSG and have 4 call. At the end of the list here, we'll go to the late and missed portion of the net. Anyone else with a 6 in your call sign, please come now. Well, with nothing heard, let's go up to the top, K6AAN, Valley Springs, California, via the text. Good evening, Mike. K6AAN, Mike in Valley Springs, California. Good evening. How about Charles, KC6UFM in Guatai, California. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Scott. Many thanks to Vicky for logging tonight, and you and Roger and Dick for herding the cats this evening. And I already gave Vicky my handheld count, and the reason I have so many is because I like to turn on all the Roger beeps and key them all at once and see how loud it gets. But otherwise, not much happening here in beautiful downtown Guatai. Kind of a beautiful day today. Got up to about 71 or 72 and very sunny. This is why I pay the sunshine tax out here, but I don't know. Otherwise, not too much else happening there, Scott, and hopefully everybody is getting settled down from being down in Orlando, and one of these days I'm going to have to make it down there, but that's a little bit of a long day trip for me, if you know what I'm talking about. So everybody have a good evening, stay safe, and hopefully catch everyone at the latest next week. KC6UFM 73 and back to net control.
Thank you, Charles. Appreciate you joining us. And have yourself a good rest of the evening. Let's go to KN6 GSG, Barry in Moss Beach, California. Good evening, Barry.
Well, good evening to you, too, and the rest of the net. The number of handhelds I have, if I include my Marine VHFs, they're 21, and I'm using the newest one that I just got yesterday, Bofang, something or other, 5RM Pro, something. Anyway, that's it. Too many radios, not enough time to use them all. So thanks for letting me check in. KN6 GSG, back to the net.
All right, thank you. You have yourself a good evening. Thanks for joining us. This is W2BLT. Let's go to the 7s. If you have a 7 in your call sign, please come now.
Number Charlie, Kilo 7, November Yankee Charlie, Doug.
Kilo 7, Oscar Golf Charlie. Kilo 7, Oscar Golf Charlie.
Kilo 7, Sierra Tango Whiskey. Kilo 7, Sierra Tango Whiskey, Ron.
Alrighty, recognizing KK7 NYC, Doug, KK7 OGC, Fred, and KK7 STW, Ron. Anyone else with a 7 in your call sign, please come now.
Victor Kilo 7, Norway Radio Tango.
Alrighty, recognizing VK7 NRT, Shane, up in Austin Sperry. Let me just clarify something here. Barry out in Moss Beach, California, if you're still listening, how many HTs do you have? Hey. You cut yourself off there, buddy. Key up, wait a minute, and give me the number again, thanks.
21 HTs, Barry, KN6 GSG, too many to use all at once.
Alrighty, thanks. Appreciate it, Barry. Let's go to KK7 NYC, Doug in Fairview, Oregon. Good evening.
Good evening to everybody on the net. KK7 NYC. I've got 8
The latest one is this little TID radio H8 that does like 12 watts on high power. But I have to hide them around the house because otherwise someone finds out how many I have and I'm going to be in trouble.
Oh boy. Have a good evening, Doug, and thanks for joining us. Next up, KK7OGC, Fred, Reno, Nevada. Good evening, Fred.
Good evening to Roger and everybody on the net. KK7OGC, Fred in Reno. I have 8 true ham radios, 4 of them to be able to hit the 220 repeater, hence the ECR from here in Reno. And then another 4 of those sporting goods store radios, so you can either put me down for 8 or 12. Anyway, thank you. KK7OGC, back to net.
Alrighty, Fred, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it. Next up, a KK7STW, Ron in Pahrump, Nevada. Looks like you're new to the system. Good evening.
You're in the net? Yes, I am. This is my first time. Anyway, less than a year into the hobby, but I only have one HT. That's my only radio. Does everything I need it to do. I have an external antenna and all-star node, so getting by good with it. Thanks for the net. Back to net control.
Alrighty, thank you, Ron. Appreciate you joining us, and by golly, stop back again. Next up, a VK7 NRT, Shane in Austin Sperry, over in Australia. Let's see, it would be good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon to Roger in the net. My first time on. Thanks for letting me join. 4 HTs. I've got a Yaesu F260 UV5R and a couple of Radiosity GD77 set up for DMR radio.
The South Coast Reflector is now disconnected from the East Coast Reflector, and now we are back to normal operation.
Alrighty, Shane, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, and to everybody on the South Coast Reflector, have a good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. Alright, that'll do it for the 7s. Let's go to the 8s. Via the text line, we have KA8BYU Roy. Who else do we have with an 8 in your call sign? Please come now.
November 8, Mike Juliet, November. November 8, Mike Juliet, November.
Alrighty, recognizing November 8, Mike Juliet, November. Who else do we have with an 8 in your call sign? Anyone else with an 8? Please come now. Alrighty, with nothing heard, let's go up and take Roy, KA8BYU, Roy in Blaisdell, New York. Good evening, Roy, and how many HDs do you have?
On the TechNet, I'm almost ashamed to admit, but after 50-some years in communications, the answer is north of 40. Best I can figure is 46, 47.
And yes, they all work. And that's discounting the two that I need to rebuild the battery packs on to make them work. So, yeah, it's amazing what you can accumulate over all the years. And there's 7 actually that are on right now between FRS, GMRS, ham, and MERS.
Well, I'll tell you, Roy, you got to do one of two things. You got to get into a 12-step program for that, or you need to have your own ham fest. Have a good evening, Roy. Appreciate you joining us. Let's go to MJN, Marson, Sterling Heights, Michigan. Good evening.
Good evening, and everybody on the TechNet. This is N8MJN. Short answer to the question is I have 5. I'm actually on one of them right now, the ICOM ID50. Also have the Anytone 878, and a couple of bow things. So, with that, I'll send it back to the control. N8MJN. Have a great evening, everyone.
And you as well, Marson. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Alrighty, folks, let's go to the 9s. If you have a 9 in your call sign, please come now. Well, with nothing heard from the 9s tonight, let's go to the late and missed. If you were late to the party or just missed your call district, now is your opportunity. Please come now.
Kilo Fox
Kilo
4
is
Alpha Charlie Bravo, KF4 ACB.
KI6WPK. Phil here.
Kilo, Quebec, 4, Charlie Alpha Bravo, KQ4, CAB, North Carolina. Kilo, Oscar 4, Victor, Oscar, Foxtrot, KO4, VOF. Alrighty, let's recognize. Try that again. Let's recognize KF4 ACB, KI6 WPK, KQ4 CAB, and KO4 VOF. Anyone else out there for the late and missed list? Please come now. Final call for the late and missed. This is Kilo Mike 6, Mike Whiskey Golf. Kilo Mike 6, Mike Whiskey Golf. KL5 VI, Kilo Lima 5 Victory. Victor 44 Kilo Mike. Victor 44 Kilo Mike. Alrighty, we're going to call it right there. Let me recognize from the bottom up. We had Hugh, Victor 44 Kilo Mike, and it's Kitson Nevis. We had KL5, VI, David, KM6, MWG, Randy, KO4, VOF, Randall, and KQ4, CAB, Jay, and KI6, WPK, Bill, and KF4, ACB, Terry. Let's go to Terry. The question of the evening is, how many working HTs do you have? Good evening.
just happened that way. Yeah, let's see. I had one going out the door today. I sold on the Dixie Traders net. Down to lucky number 13 as far as HTs go. Some Mars modded. I've got some others too. I've got FRS and GMRS. And the 13 work ham radios, HTs, and every one are charged up because we've been expecting snow, and I don't want to get caught flat-footed on them.
Well, lucky 13 it is, Terry. Thanks for joining us, and you have yourself a good week. This is W2BLT. Let's go to KI6WPK, Bill in San Francisco, California. Good evening.
Good evening to you. Good evening to all the net. I have 10 HTs, and like a prior operator said, too many HTs and not enough time to use them all. I got Bofangs and Quanchangs and Yaesus and just too many. But I certainly enjoy using them. Back to net, KI6WPK.
Well, that's the bottom line. As long as you enjoy it, it's a good thing. Thanks for joining us, Bill. Let's go to KQ4, CABJ in Raleigh, North Carolina. Good evening.
Good evening, Raleigh, North Carolina, KQ4CAB. And I think the question of the evening is, how many HTs? I have 8 HTs, and I just got this one. It's a Bofang UV25, and I've been kind of impressed with that radio. Really have. Hope everybody out there is doing well. We're getting ready for snow here, 40 degrees in Raleigh, and everyone have a great one. Thanks for calling on Jay. KQ4CAB, back to net control.
Well, thanks for joining us, Jay. And you had quite a hum on your transmission there. Have a good evening. Let's go to KO4 VOF, Randall in Orlando, Florida. Good evening, Randall.
Good evening. Yeah, I probably got about 8 or 9 HTs, Yaesu, Anytones, and a handful of Bofangs, and then I probably got that many or more GMRS radios that I was playing with before I got my ham license. And this is KO4 VOF, back to net control.
Thank you, Randall. Appreciate you joining us. Let's go back out to California, Salinas, California, to Randy, KM6MWG. Good evening, Randy, and how many HTs do you have working?
13, including 2 Radio Shack radios that I bought new in 1996. This is KM6MWG. Back to you.
Alrighty, thank you, Randy. You have a great evening. Appreciate you being here. Next up, KL5 VI David in Soldotna, Alaska. Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, you got that right. That's not many people get Soldotna right. But anyway, I'm just gonna say the HTs. I'm gonna say 4 that I use regularly, and I don't know how many I do have. There's just, counting bubble pack radios, but they all work. But I'm just gonna say 4. That's the ones I use all the time. GL5BI. Thanks for doing that, and thanks everybody. Back to you.
All right, David, thanks for joining us, and it's great talking with you. And last on this list for tonight, Victor 44 Kilo Mike. Good evening, Hugh.
Hi, good evening. Good evening to all. We have about 6 working and about another 4 that's not working that we have on the shelf to play with. So that's it for me, and you have a nice evening from the Caribbean. Victor 44 Kilo Mike.
Alrighty, thank you, Hugh. You folks down there in St. Kitts and Nevis have a great rest of the evening. Good talking with you again. Alrighty, folks, that's going to do it for the TechNet for another week. On behalf of WB2JPQ, Dick, KO4QMM, Roger, and KE8PKY, Vicky, handling all the login duties tonight. This is Scott, W2BLT, wishing everybody a great evening and returning the reflector to normal amateur use. 7-3.